As the dust clears from the political upheaval in Syria, an American has made a surprise appearance.
There was two men with guns, and then there's another man named Ely, and they helped me get out of prison.
Timmerman had been imprisoned for 7 months after crossing Syria's border illegally on a Christian pilgrimage.
President Biden has announced the largest single-day act of clemency in modern history. The sentences of more than 1,000 people are being commuted, and dozens of folks are getting pardoned.
There's a little bit of pressure on both sides for the president to act on these pardons while he has the power to do so.
Shell casings found at the scene matched the 3D printed ghost gun 26-year-old Luigi Mangione had in his possession when he was arrested, according to the NYPD.
A source tells CBS News prosecutors from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office have begun presenting evidence against Mangione to a New York grand jury.
President-elect Donald Trump rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange this morning after being named Time Magazine's Person of the Year.
Thank you for joining us. Less than a week after the fall of Assad, an American has been discovered in Syria. A man identifying himself as Travis Timmerman of Missouri was spotted walking barefoot near Damascus Thursday. He says he was held in a Syrian prison for 7 months. He spoke with CBS News about the experience.
It wasn't bad. I was never beaten. The only really bad part was that I couldn't go to the bathroom when I wanted to. When I came to Syria, I was unaware of the political situation entirely, because that's just how I am. I came here for spiritual purposes.
The discovery of Timmerman is reigniting hope for American journalist Austin Tice, who was kidnapped in 2012. His family still believes he's alive. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer has more.
If there's any hard evidence about what happened to Austin Tice or where he is now, it might lie in the millions and millions of documents left behind by the Assad regime. This was a small Air Force base right in the center of Damascus, winter coat, and lots of documents which are going to be valuable in deciphering what happened in this place, particularly what happened to prisoners. Interesting. Russian and Syrian writing in here. The Russians, of course, became one of Bashar al-Assad's main backers and support until suddenly they decided they wanted out. And as we now know, the regime collapsed in a matter of weeks. This is the office of a senior officer of an essential service, the maintenance of radars for Assad's regime. And yet, look at it. It's chaotic. Everything is of terrible quality. It's just squalid. It underlines how anybody who was associated with this dictatorship and its repressive system was at once degraded by it and corrupted. The document room. Who knows what terrible secrets these file folders hold. And at the end of the row, a single potato. I mean, it kind of captures the surrealism of the whole situation. A brutal dictatorship suddenly replaced by thousands of, on the whole, smiling Islamist fighters, and Syria's future totally up in the air. Back to you.
Elizabeth Palmer, thank you. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata joins us now. I mean, Charlie, we all need just a collective moment to digest what we just saw and heard from Liz Palmer. But what more do we know about Timmerman?
Well, Lindsay, his loved ones have called it a Christmas miracle, and it looks that way. You know, it came out of the blue. It was certainly a surprise. He was found literally wandering around the outskirts of Damascus. His family had no idea that he had crossed into Syria. As you heard in that short report, he had no idea what was going on in Syria. He was part of a Christian pilgrimage, but he was there without permission. He was hiding out. But of course, he was caught by border guards. His words, he wasn't beaten. The toughest part was that he wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom. He wasn't even aware that there had been a sort of regime change, just that he was able to walk outside the prison. So his family are delighted because the last time they knew of his whereabouts was in Hungary. So they're hoping to get him back. But it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary discovery. And hats off to our team, CBS News team in Damascus, for finding him.
Certainly, and still no word on Austin Tice's whereabouts, but we know that the U.S. government is working on it. Liz Palmer did say in her report, the future of Syria unknown at this point. What does the U.S. government make of the Syrian rebels?
I was just having conversations with U.S. officials here, and what I'm told is that they're making the right noises, right? But this is a group that may have cut ties with al-Qaeda, but that main group, right, HTS, it's an Islamist militant organization, as Liz just pointed out. Its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, he remains on the U.S. terror list for attacks against U.S. troops. This is a man, and by the way, I was there when this split happened with al-Nusra. He was in bed with, or in league with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS. They went their separate ways, but his group, formerly known as al-Nusra, it was feared in that region. It was blamed for a number of atrocities, and there may be some evidence that those atrocities are continuing in places like Latakia. Some of the elements within that group are sworn enemies to America's allies on the ground, the Kurdish forces. So, this really hasn't played out. This is an Islamist militant group that really doesn't go hand in hand with democracy. However, the mood music, he has said the West has nothing to fear, he has said in interviews. He's also said that, groups should live together inside Syria. But I think it's going to be a real measure of what happens in the next, 12 weeks, maybe a little bit longer than that. They know full well that they're not going to need Western support in that region. So it would be to their behest to make sure that they have some semblance of trying to keep Syria together. This is a very splintered, fractured, blood-soaked country, and it has seen some terrible atrocities in the past, and it is going to face some challenges in the future.
Charlie D'Agata, we always appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
In one of the final major acts of his administration, President Biden commuted the sentences of roughly 1,500 people Thursday and pardoned another 39. The White House called it the largest single-day act of clemency in modern history. It comes just over a week after Biden's highly criticized decision to grant his son, Hunter Biden, a broad pardon for any crimes he has or may have committed over the past decade. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now. Nancy, who was included in this round of clemency?
Well, Lindsay, the 39 individuals who were pardoned, we're told, had all committed nonviolent offenses. The White House made sure to point that out right away. As for the 1,500 people from around the country who saw their sentences commuted, they fell into a number of categories. First of all, we're told that they were all serving their sentences in home confinement, that they were sent home as part of a COVID-era program. So these are already people who were deemed safe enough to be let out of prison and to serve out some of their term from home. We're also told that these are individuals who had been rehabilitated into their families and had been serving the community in some way, that were working to make the community safer. And then finally, a number of these 1,500 individuals were serving sentences that were longer than sentences would have been had they been convicted for the same crimes today, because sentencing guidelines change over time, laws change over time. So in some of these cases, these individuals were serving long prison sentences for crimes that they would have gotten much shorter prison sentences for today if prosecutors would have chosen to convict at all.
Can you put this into historical perspective for us?
Sure. So every president has this very sacred opportunity and awesome power to commute sentences, to pardon individuals, and they typically do the lion's share of it as they are leaving office. It's kind of one of the big final items on their to-do list. And presidents all have different criteria for who they choose and why they choose them. Sometimes they are people who are supporters or friends. In Biden's case, a family member, his son. That has happened before as well. In this case, the Biden administration is trying to make a point that, yes, they heard the criticism when the president went back on his position about 2 weeks ago and did, in fact, pardon his son Hunter. And they're saying they heard the criticism from around the country that they should extend those kinds of second chances, that kind of grace, to other people who have been convicted of, in some cases, serious crimes. And so this is the first batch, but they insist that there will be more individuals that do get granted clemency before President Biden leaves office, because they believe in those second chances, and they're still combing through all the potential pardoned and individuals and commuted sentences to figure out how many more will make it onto that list.
Nancy Cordes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Later this hour, we will speak with one of the people that President Biden granted clemency to. That's right here on CBS News. President-elect Donald Trump rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange Thursday to celebrate being recognized as Time Person of the Year for the second time. The publication chose Trump for, quote, marshaling a comeback of historic proportions, for driving a once-in-a-generation political realignment, for reshaping the American presidency and altering America's role in the world. Joined by some of his family and cabinet picks, Trump reflected on his first term in office and also spoke about how his next one will be different.
We came down and we're driving down Pennsylvania Avenue, and it was so beautiful. I said, you know, I've never done this before. I didn't know anybody. I got to the Oval Office, and I'm picking all these big positions, and I didn't really know the people in Washington, but boy, did I get to learn fast. And now we do, and I think we have an incredible staff behind me and others that aren't here, and we're going to do a fantastic job.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, some of his other cabinet picks are still working to gain support for their eventual confirmations. Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman became the first Democrat to meet with Defense Secretary pick Pete Hegseth Thursday. CBS News political reporter Shauna Mizell joins us now from West Palm Beach, Florida. Shauna, what more do we know about this meeting between Fetterman and Hegseth, and can we expect more Democrats to meet with Hegseth?
Well, as you noted, this is going to be the first meeting that Hegseth has had with a Democrat on the Senate side. He's been making his case to Republican senators for weeks now, but he met with Fetterman. He said that they had a great conversation. And, you know, Fetterman, for his part, said that he will go through the process, but he's also going to continue to listen to his colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Now, Hegseth, as well as other Trump cabinet picks, have extended the invitation to meet with Democrats across both chambers, both the House and the Senate, but Fetterman being the first to say yes. So if others follow in the senator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's footsteps, that actually remains to be seen.
CBS News has learned that Chinese President Xi Jinping is not expected to attend Trump's inauguration after getting an invitation from the president-elect after the election. What more can you tell us?
That's right. Well, Trump extended this invitation to Xi Jinping to attend the inauguration in November, but CBS News has learned that the president of China will actually not be attending. And if he had, it really would have been of historical nature. But this really signifies, and it's important because it signifies how Trump is going to be handling foreign policy and be dealing with foreign nations, in particular China. You had his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, say that this really represents them trying to keep an open dialogue with China and really keeping it friendly, not adversarial.
Shauna Mizell, thank you. A hearing for the UnitedHealthcare CEO shooting suspect is scheduled for December 30th in Pennsylvania. This comes as the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has started presenting evidence to a grand jury in the case against Luigi Mangione. New York prosecutors charged the 26-year-old suspected gunman with second-degree murder after he was arrested in Pennsylvania on Monday. Mangione faces several other charges in Pennsylvania, where he is currently being held in a state prison. Joining us now is Anna Schechter. She's the senior coordinating producer for CBS News' Crime and Public Safety Unit. Anna, the New York City Police Department says that they are getting a clearer picture of potential motive in this. What more can you tell us?
Well, they had a really good idea in the hours after the shooting when they found deny, delay, depose on those ballistics. But now they have a mountain of evidence because of his own personal writings that he had on him. So he named UnitedHealthcare by name in a 300-word manifesto of sorts, essentially attempting to justify his actions. And he specifically talked about how this company had such a huge market share, like right behind Apple and Google. And so that is what police and investigators are looking at, speaking directly to motive. However, NYPD says they have no indication that he was ever insured by UnitedHealthcare.
What do we know about the conditions at the jail that he's being housed at?
Well, because this is so high profile, he's being housed alone in a single cell with no other inmates. He is not in solitary confinement, but he is being kept by himself. On these high-profile cases, they don't like to have someone like him mingling with the other incarcerated people because just bad things can happen. Fights can erupt. There can be sort of bounties on people who are, you know, big names in the public eye, and sometimes the community in jail finds out about that. So that's what we know. Apparently, he has not given any incriminating information to investigators who have met and talked with him while he's been incarcerated. He does have a lawyer, so he's probably getting legal advice. But DA Alvin Bragg has already filed charges, and as you mentioned in the intro, is already presenting the evidence that places him at the scene of the crime to a grand jury.
CBS News confirmed his verified reports of wanted posters popping up around New York City with red X's over the CEO, the late CEO Brian Thompson's face, and other CEOs. How concerning is this?
Very concerning, and the counterintelligence arm of the NYPD is really worried. In fact, this is like a top priority for them right now, because when people put that sort of thing up, that is a direct threat potentially. Someone might perceive that, and when people make threats online or, you know, in writing, they are exponentially more likely to carry it out. So this is highly concerning to counterintelligence, to counterterrorism arm of the NYPD.
Keep us posted, Anna Schechter.
Will
Thank
do.
you. They're some of the most at-risk areas for wildfires, and as a result, some insurance companies are staying away. What can be done to keep homeowners insured, and why this problem stretches far beyond California? Plus, a stunning number of swatting attacks targeting members of Congress. We'll have a report from Capitol Hill on this recent wave of incidents. You're watching The Daily Report.
"60 Minutes takes you to Paris for the unveiling of the restored Cathedral of Notre Dame.
It resisted to 2 world wars. This is a message of achievement.
How did America help? You'll be surprised as you get a tour like no other. It's time for 60 Minutes.
I can see clearly, CBS Mornings.
Weekdays on CBS.
Yeah!
Tony, you coming?
No, I'm going to stick around for an hour.
CBS Mornings Plus with Adriana Diaz and Tony DeCopel, right after CBS Mornings.
It's just like mornings.
Plus fun.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. What price should Moscow pay for trying to manipulate American voters? Isn't that giving people false hope? That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. And that means a civil conversation with perspective.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go with 48 Hours Podcasts. Real crimes, real lives, real justice. Listen to 48 Hours Podcasts wherever you get your podcasts.
The wildfire spreading throughout Southern California has burned more than 4,000 acres of land since Monday, but firefighters are beginning to make progress. Officials say the Franklin fire in Malibu is now 20% contained. During a news conference Thursday, authorities said some of the evacuation orders in the area will be lifted for residents soon. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans has the latest.
So one of the reasons they're able to lift these evacuation orders is because the weather has changed dramatically. Those high winds that were driving the flames, that's gone now. There's not a breath of wind out here. The weather is a lot cooler. There's even a little bit of rain in the forecast. So that's all helping firefighters up the containment on this fire, currently up to 20%, and that's a pretty good number. Now, I want to show you some of the damage that this fire has done. If you look at the mountains behind me here, you can see that they're all scorched black, and there is barely any vegetation left, and what's left there may not survive. And the problem is, when the rains come, that could lead to some major mudslides. And from left to right, as far as I can see here, these mountains are scorched and blackened. Now, as we pan to the left a little bit, you're going to see Pepperdine University. You can see how close the fire came to some of the buildings on campus there. Students had to shelter in place for a couple of days. Those shelter-in-place orders have been lifted now. School will be getting back to normal, probably not until Monday. But the good news right now, evacuation orders are being lifted, and some people will start coming home this afternoon.
Carter Evans, thank you. U.S. Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger testified Wednesday that there have been more than 700 threats made against lawmakers in the past month alone. Manger also said there have been more than 50 reports of members of Congress being swatted in the past month. That's when a false police report is made to harass someone. The chief says the department needs more staff in order to continue protecting lawmakers.
The heightened threat level in this country has not gone down. And so we do need additional resources. We provide the protection at the level it needs to be, but you do that through officers working double shifts and averaging, our DPD agents average 50 hours of overtime every pay period.
For more, I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland. Scott, you have new reporting about some of these recent threats against lawmakers. What can you tell us?
Yeah, that's the Capitol Police Chief in his normal measured tone, Lindsay, but in his measured tone, he is raising all kinds of red flags and trying to blare a siren of warning that there are some issues here. This is an elevated threat level, which by our latest CBS News reporting is between 7,000 and 8,000 threat investigations involving the Congress or the Capitol just this year, just in 2024. That is bonkers. It's also an enormous tonnage for dozens of agents the Capitol Police have to chase down these threat investigations. Think about a pile of work, you can't get to the top of it. This is one of those piles they're at risk of having when they have this many cases coming in and only so much manpower. What are some of these cases? We know a lot of this has manifested itself in the form of death threats. The Democratic congressman from North Carolina, Wiley Nickel, told me he has received a series of death threats to his office just in the past few weeks after he issued a critical statement about Donald Trump. And it's not the congressman taking those calls, it's the junior staffers and the interns getting menacing calls and menacing death threats when they answer the phone. The swatting incidents have involved victims of both parties. This is a bipartisan menacing, and it's been 50 of them, 50 swatting incidents in just November. That's a danger to the victim, the target of the swatting incidents, because when law enforcement is falsely called to their homes under the guise of a threat, there can be a miscommunication, there can be an opening of fire, there can be a danger to the victims. And in this case, Lindsay, the victims are members of Congress themselves.
Is the Capitol Police Department changing anything to address this?
Yeah, they're deploying people further out and wide. You know, there's a bit of protection beneath this Capitol dome, surrounded by metal detectors, reinforcements and hundreds of Capitol Police officers. Set aside January 6th, this is a very safe place to be. But members of Congress may feel more vulnerable at the airport, on the road, in their district offices, which, Lindsay, sometimes it's in a strip mall next to a Chipotle or a Subway, not the most heavily fortified building. They're looking to put more Capitol Police out and about in the country to protect members when they may be more vulnerable, when they're not beneath the protective dome.
Wow, a lot to think about there. Scott, before we let you go, there's a new report by the Justice Department Inspector General revealing the FBI missed a basic step in its intelligence efforts ahead of January 6th, 2021. What is that basic step?
What they're arguing here is that the FBI could have rattled the cages at its field offices to check in with their human sources, their informants, before January 6th to get better intel of the threat that was looming that day. Everybody was caught so flat-footed when that riotous mob arrived here. The FBI has already looked through where some of the pitfalls were, where some of the mistakes were made. Lindsay, that's one of them. They could have rattled the cages down at the little field office levels in the cities across the country to see what are your sources telling you, what risk does Washington hold on a day that Donald Trump said would be wild in advance.
Scott McFarland, thank you. Coming up after a campaign heavily focused on the economy, President-elect Trump opened Wall Street Thursday, why some traders are betting big ahead of a second Trump administration. You're watching The Daily Report.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Let 60 Minutes take you on a private tour of the National Archives.
So there may be treasures like this buried in boxes.
Historical secrets from America's past.
So this is original from 1778?
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places. Bright, shiny faces.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Put me in the game, coach.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
The best interviews feel like it's just a conversation with a neighbor.
Hey.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask a question that is the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Here we go. Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
To find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
Funding Cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Here are some additions to our top stories. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol lashed out at political opponents Thursday, defending his short-lived martial law declaration as a means to protect democracy. Yoon says he has no plans to resign, despite members of his own party saying he should be impeached. Yoon said he would fight to the end, even as he faces a second impeachment vote on Saturday. The first vote failed because of a boycott from most of the ruling party. You know those Stanley Cups that have become a pop culture phenomenon? Well, the company behind that is recalling 2.6 million mugs after dozens of consumers complained, some saying they were burned. The recall covers Stanley Switchback and Trigger Action stainless steel travel mugs. Customer complaints say the lids can become loose and detach while in use. Stanley is offering free replacement lids to owners of these mugs. Wholesale prices rose more than expected in November, according to the new Producer Price Index data released Thursday. The PPI rose 0.4% for the month, double the Dow Jones estimate. The index rose 0.3% year over year. The prices of eggs, produce, and poultry saw particular spikes. President-elect Donald Trump returned to his hometown of New York City Thursday to ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Wall Street investors appear to have embraced the incoming administration. All three major stock indexes have hit record highs since Election Day. As of Thursday, the Dow has risen more than 5% from November 5th. The S&P is up nearly 6%, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ is up nearly 10%. During an interview, Trump was asked about his message to American investors.
Well, I think you're going to see some very good days ahead. A lot of incentives are going to be given. We have to conclude a couple of bad wars that are going on. A lot of bad things are going on, but we'll get them done.
Let's bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. So, Kelly, how do investors think Trump and his policies will help them?
So less regulation and lower taxes. You know, President-elect Trump has really campaigned to the investor community that he's going to have a lighter touch regulatory environment. So that means easier mergers and acquisitions, easier to get things done quickly, less red tape. And he's also vowed to bring down the corporate tax rate. Remember, he did that during his first administration. It's already pretty low, but he wants to lower that even further to 15%. That would take an act of Congress, but investors like this type of rhetoric. And I can tell you, I was down there today. There were chants of USA, USA, USA. People were excited.
Are investors at all concerned about what we keep talking about, which is his tariff proposals? I mean, Trump just himself said in a recent interview he can't guarantee that Americans won't pay higher prices as a result.
This is what I find really interesting, because I can tell you businesses and consumers are concerned about that. They're saying, wow, you know, this could really hurt profits, or we pass that on to consumers. Investors don't seem to be trading that way right now. We're really just seeing this, what we like to call animal spirits. It means you're trading on optimism and vibes. Okay. I think where it's going to be interesting is when January comes and he does take office and we do see, are these threats or are these going to be put into action? Exactly. Then you could see the stock market maybe react negatively.
Are all of the stock gains about Trump, or do other factors play in as well?
Rate cuts. Okay. So you mentioned it in the headlines that you just talked about. The producer price index was hotter than expected. That's important because when companies pay more for the goods they buy, they pass that on to us. We're still expecting a rate cut, though, next week. And the market is saying we're excited about this, we want this, and they're trading on that. Where, again, I see things potentially going awry is next year we're expecting less rate cuts. And even though that may have nothing to do with Trump, you could see a Trump stock market just react negatively if you're not going to have as many rate cuts.
So we've been talking mostly about investors, but what does this mean for the average person who may not be invested at all in the stock market, or maybe they just sort of do like a set and forget investment account for retirement?
Right. I don't want anyone to have FOMO and just pour the money into the stock market, because we are seeing investors just push these indexes and these equities to heights that we haven't seen. But depending on where you are in your career, you want to have exposure that matches the risk that you're willing to take. So, you know, the set it and forget it is not a bad strategy, simply because, you know, you are in a diversified portfolio. But yeah, don't throw all your money into one stock.
Okay. Always good advice. Kelly O'Grady, thank you. The Biden administration has announced a new rule that will limit banks' ability to charge overdraft fees. Under the rule, fees would be capped at $5 instead of the $35 customers are typically charged. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says this could save households that pay overdraft fees around $225 a year and around $5 billion for all Americans combined. The rule would take effect next October. However, it's unclear if the Trump administration would support this new rule. FEMA declared an unprecedented 179 disasters in 2024. So to put that in perspective, that means some type of disaster declaration was made about every 2 days throughout the year. In California, increasingly intense wildfires have become more common in recent years and have upended the lives of thousands. To make matters worse, insurance options are dwindling for Californians impacted by these fires. More insurers are refusing to provide wildfire coverage or have begun charging exorbitant fees, leaving many homes in danger. Catherine Boudreau has been following the story. She's a senior sustainability reporter for Business Insider. Catherine, thanks for being here. Why are more insurers refusing to provide wildfire coverage in California?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, this comes down to a few factors. So on one hand, there's climate change is driving more frequent and intense storms, hurricanes, wildfires. So that's creating more disasters to cover. Also, more people are moving into areas that are vulnerable to disasters, including wildfires and hurricanes. So, of course, that means more damage, more destruction, higher costs. And then it's also more expensive to rebuild after a natural disaster because of inflation, the materials to build a home, very expensive. So this has created kind of an unsustainable situation for insurance companies. That's what they tell us. And in response, you've seen a number of actions, including in California, where they're pulling out of the riskiest areas, the most vulnerable areas. They're not renewing, tens of thousands of policies. And yeah, in some cases, companies have pulled out of the state altogether.
So California has established insurance protections in areas of risk for earthquakes in the past. States like Florida have established some kind of legislation that protects residents from losing or having to pay more for insurance. What are the solutions being discussed here to make sure that people just aren't left without the insurance they need?
Yeah. So in California, there is what's called an insurer of last resort. And we're seeing that more homeowners are being pushed into that program because they're left with fewer and fewer options for insurance. But of course, you don't want too many people going to the insurer of last resort, especially in a very risky wildfire-prone area.
And why is, can you explain that? Why is that?
One insurer with too much responsibility, that just increases the risk that one catastrophe could sink the system. Of course, that hasn't happened in California, but you've seen state insurance regulators trying to find a solution to this problem. So they're working with insurance companies, basically in exchange for insurance companies being able to raise premiums a little bit easier. They'll be required to serve some of the riskiest areas in the more wildfire-prone areas.
I mean, what would you tell people who aren't in California or Florida or some of these states where this is happening? I mean, is this going to become an issue for every American at some point, regardless of where they live? Can you hear me, Catherine? All right, it looks like we've lost comms with Catherine. Thank you so much for your time. As we've been reporting, President Biden granted clemency Thursday to roughly 1,500 people, and all of those whose sentences he commuted had previously been placed on home confinement during the COVID-19 pandemic under the CARES Act. One of those people is Sabrina Morgan, and she joins me now. Sabrina, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to us a little bit about your background, your conviction, and your time through the criminal justice system.
So I was sentenced in 2017. I was indicted in 2014. So I spent 3 years on pretrial release, meaning I was out amongst the free people, but I knew I had a prison sentence coming. And so I turned myself into the federal marshals in 2017. I spent 1 year in federal holding, waiting for my sentence. And then I was sentenced in 2018 for a 9-year sentence. And that was during the pandemic came. And in 2021, June 2021, I was released on the CARES Act to spend the rest of my sentence, which was 44 months on home confinement. And I've actually done 42 of those months. I've got 54 days left, but it still is awesome that this is coming.
What does this decision mean for you? You said that you have just 2 months left. What was your reaction to this news, and what does this mean for you now for the next few months and beyond?
This means I get to go advocate with dream.org, and I'm super excited about that because there's so much that needs to be changed in the system. And so I'm super excited about that. Candia Milton was the one that got to deliver the message to me that I was getting clemency. And so it's been incredibly exciting.
And you've written about how when you actually got indicted by the federal government, and I don't believe that people, should be defined by the worst mistakes of their lives, but it was for conspiracy to distribute large quantities of methamphetamine and heroin throughout several counties in Missouri. But you say it was a relief when you got indicted and the beginning of your journey to where you are now. There are some people who may be sitting at home and they look at someone who has been through the system, pleaded guilty, been in prison. They look at people as a criminal. What do you want those people to know?
It's really interesting because I spoke at a law school recently, and I was the teacher actually asked everybody, would you be afraid of somebody that was convicted or took a guilty plea for 44 kilos of methamphetamine and drug trafficking with the furtherance of a weapon? And they all said yes. And then I got up and spoke. And what was very interesting to me is everybody around me said that they would be worried. They would be nervous to be in the presence of somebody like me. And then I got up and spoke to them and watched their faces as I spoke, as I became a human before their eyes. What I want them to know is don't be afraid of those people. There's so many of us that come out on the other side, a completely different person. I mean, our sentence gives us that opportunity to come out and relieve ourselves from all of the hidden secrets, the double lives that we've lived in the past. And now, okay, here it is. I was able to be extracted from the drug world. I was able to start seeing things in a different light. And now I see all these people that are amazing, that are coming out, that came out on the CARES Act with less than 1% recidivism rate. We worked hard for this. I mean, people think of home confinement, they think we're just hanging out at home, but we work. We have to be 100% dedicated to this whole situation. We have to be accountable for our time from midnight to 11:59 at night. We have to have every single thing that we do accounted for. And so we've worked hard, and every single person on the CARES Act deserves this.
Well,
and I'm excited for everybody.
Sabrina Morgan, we certainly appreciate you coming on and telling your story. We look forward to seeing more of what you're doing for Dream.org. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Proposed Trump administration tariffs could hit kids' toy boxes and adults' wallets. Up next, more on how new economic policies surrounding overseas manufacturers could cause toy prices to spike here at home. You're streaming The Daily Report.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
Can see clearly now.
Clearly, CBS Mornings.
Weekdays on CBS.
Yeah!
Tony, coming?
No, I'm gonna stick around for an hour.
Hey! CBS Mornings Plus with Adriana Diaz and Tony DeCopel, right after CBS Mornings.
It's just like mornings.
Plus fun.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be a bright, sunshiny day.
These 7 miles of tunnels were the secret storage site for fuel for the Navy's Pacific Fleet in planes.
So this is one of the tanks.
Oh my gosh.
What happened 20 stories below ground is a story for 60 Minutes.
This thing that was a lifeline for the fleet is a threat.
That's right.
I'm Erin Moriarty of 48 Hours, and of all the cases I've covered, this is the one that troubles me most. Listen to Murder in the Orange Grove, the troubled case against Crosley Green, wherever you get your podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Sunday morning, a visit with the Wayans at Papa's house, plus affairs of state with the diplomat, and in praise of pigeons. Listen for the trumpet.
The holiday season typically generates extra revenue for toy companies, but that may not be the case in the near future. President-elect Trump's promises to impose tariffs on countries like China, Canada, and Mexico may lead to price increases of some everyday items, including toys. In 2023, U.S. retail sales of toys generated $28 billion, according to the Toy Association, which was actually an 8% decline from the previous year. And with 85% of toys sold in the U.S. being imported from China, industry experts say these potential tariffs would ultimately cause substantial harm to consumers and the industry as a whole. Scott Horsley has been following this story. He is NPR's chief economics correspondent. Scott, thanks for making time for us. What are you hearing from toy company executives about these tariffs and any plans to make up potential deficits?
Well, obviously, these tariffs are not going to affect toys being purchased during the current holiday season, but toy companies are already looking ahead to, Christmas 2025. They're planning their manufacturing, they're pricing their products. And when they go to trade shows, when they talk to their vendors, there's a lot of concern about what the president-elect's threatened tariffs would mean. As you say, 85% of the toys right now are manufactured in China. A 60% tariff on toys next Christmas could result in a substantial price hike. And again, that price would be paid by the U.S. importers and ultimately by their customers, not by the Chinese manufacturers.
Why don't more toy companies manufacture their products domestically?
Well, decades ago, they did do a lot of their manufacturing domestically, but starting in the 1990s and probably accelerating in the current century, most of the toy manufacturing has moved offshore, first to South Korea and then to China. It's just a question of cost. It's much more cost effective to manufacture a labor-intensive product like toys in a place like China than here in the United States, where labor rates are much higher and where we've got very low unemployment. There's just not a workforce here to do this kind of work. Now, there are still some toys manufactured in the United States. They tend to be big toys that would be bulky and hard to ship from overseas. They're often made of extruded plastic, which is not very labor intensive. But for anything from a toy to an electronic game or a doll, it's going to require some man hours or per people hours to put together. That's probably going to be done someplace else.
How soon could consumers see prices jump, and by how much?
Well, again, if the products are coming from China and the president-elect makes good on his threat to impose a 60% tariff, most of that would likely be passed on to consumers. It's possible that some of it would come out of the toy company's profit margin, but most would be passed along. So, for example, a company that makes Tonka trucks told me a Tonka dump truck that sells for $30 today might be $45 next Christmas.
Wow. And would Christmas be the soonest? Or, kids have birthdays all year. Would we see some impact sooner? Obviously, it all depends on what he does. It could happen sooner,
sure. Yeah. I talked to Jay Foreman, who runs a toy company down in Florida, and he's on the government affairs committee of the Toy Industry Association. He worries that the tariffs could kick in right in the back to school era and the last few months of the year, which is when the toy business does the lion's share of their sales.
Scott Horsley, very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Still to come, new life for an ancient shipwreck. What this Mediterranean discovery could tell historians about life more than 2,000 years ago. You're watching The Daily Report.
Politics isn't a game. The data says you do have a women problem. Politics is about policy. Isn't that giving people false hope? I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation is not an anchor, it's not an actress. You are up here to moderate a conversation. That means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports. Tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are emergency. We are depressurized.
How could this have happened?
It's still happening right now.
Meet the Boeing whistleblowers who believe they know how.
They're fighting for faulty parts?
Yeah, and good parts. They're not too picky.
Wow.
It's time for a 60 Minutes investigation.
Sunday morning, the miracle of Paris's Notre Dame, plus actor Daniel Craig and Billie Eilish, 22 but already a legend. Listen for the trumpet.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
It was almost like being face-to-face with the devil.
Women riding bicycles dismembered.
She just vanished.
48 hours reports. I fought and fought.
911, what is your emergency?
She disappeared off the face of the earth. Ever think in your wildest dreams someone might want to kill you?
This almost became a game of psychological warfare.
You're caught. You're gonna go down.
Stream 48 hours, 24/7.
Parts of the Midwest and Northeast are battling an Arctic blast, and intense wind and below freezing temperatures could bring heavy snow across the Great Lakes region. Here's meteorologist Mike Bettis from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Well, the Great Lakes are really producing some snow right now. In some instances, snow as much as 6 inches an hour today. Really incredible stuff. And right through the night, more snow is on the way, especially Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. That should begin to wrap up for us, I'd say, by mid-morning tomorrow. It should really begin to taper off. The snowfall rates come way down as well. And as we head toward the weekend, a little bit less snow here around the Great Lakes. But the totals still impressive from this point going forward. Around the Tug Hill Plateau here in New York, as much as a foot of snow is on the way between Erie and Buffalo. 5 to 8 inches, and then some snow for you right along the edge of Lake Michigan as well. We're going to see below average temperatures around the Great Lakes and into the Northeast tomorrow, hoping for a warm-up as we head into the weekend, as air should modify a bit as that low exits and the warmer air begins to move in for most of us. Not all of us, but most of us. So the next system that comes in is likely to be mostly rain in this situation. We'll watch for some icing in Iowa and then snow way off to the north here. The area to really watch for some icing will be in Iowa, especially along heavily traveled I-80. And for more live coverage, you can always check us out on the Weather Channel on cable and, of course, on your smart TV as well.
Mike Bettis, thank you. The biggest stars in music will be celebrated tonight at the annual Billboard Music Awards. Rising country music star Zach Bryan and pop icon Taylor Swift lead the pack with the most nominations. Bryan has 18 nods, while Swift, the most decorated female artist in Billboard history, has 16. The singer-songwriters are also nominated for Top Artist of the Year, along with Sabrina Carpenter, Drake, and Morgan Wallen. You can stream the Billboard Music Awards tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on Paramount+. Well, a teen chess prodigy from India became the youngest world chess champion on Thursday. 18-year-old Gukesh Dommaraju burst into tears after defeating the defending world chess champion in the final match. He is now the youngest winner since Garry Kasparov won the World Chess Championship at age 22 back in 1985. While Dommaraju wasn't a favorite to win the championship, he's no slouch. He became India's youngest grandmaster as a 12-year-old and is among the youngest in the history of chess. A snapshot of ancient maritime history was recently found under Italian waters. This week, Italian officials announced the discovery of a 2,500-year-old shipwreck off the coast of Sicily. The wreck dates back to the 5th and 6th centuries BC and was unearthed after a 3-week excavation in September. Archaeologists also found a trove of anchors near the wreck, with some dating back to the prehistoric era. Officials say the findings could give insight into Sicilian history when the island was part of ancient Greece. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. An American prisoner is freed from Syria while the search continues for another. We'll discuss where Syria stands following the fall of the Assad regime. Plus, New York police say they're getting a clearer picture of why they believe the suspect in the UnitedHealthcare CEO shooting allegedly pulled the trigger. The latest on the murder investigation. And lawmakers face a wave of violent threats. More on what police say they need to keep Congress safe. You're watching CBS News 24/7.
CBS Mornings Plus, clearly more news, more smart conversation.
More money-saving tips, more recipes.
More uplifting ways to get you on your way.
Plus, more sports, more weather.
Clearly, more CBS Mornings.
Plus,
sunshine.